Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Alina Bassi, and I'm an investment manager at Ananda Impact Ventures. And Ananda is one of Europe's leading early stage impact VCs. So we invest into mission driven founders that want to completely disrupt the industries that they're working in. We operate across Europe, so we're a pan-European fund with offices in London, Berlin, and Munich, and we're a team of entrepreneurs, scientists, and engineers. So I myself too have a chemical engineering background. I started off in industry, working in industrial engineering for 7 years before being an entrepreneur and founding my own startup in the similar space, so waste to plastic recycling, before ending up in impact investing with Ananda about 3 years ago. Sure. So venture capital is really institutional capital. It's usually the first, it's not necessarily private capital, and it can be, but it's pulled from limited partners, which are called your LPs. And so they provide capital to venture capital firms in order to then deploy capital into startups. So they could be, they're defined in certain theses. There's certain time horizons on when the fund should be returned. And the key difference is that because we're institutionalized, we of course report to our LPs. So we don't just provide capital, but we also provide strategic support to the entrepreneurs. We also provide network. We also have the capacity to follow on. So we're not just necessarily providing funding only, but also other value add opportunities. Whereas angel investors are typically individual investors. So it's usually their capital that they're investing into early stage companies. The process is a lot less formal, so it's much easier for you to invest your own personal capital into a company. And because it's personal capital, it can, of course, lead to you writing smaller checks than if it's from a VC. When it comes to funding, it's really, really crucial for entrepreneurs to be able to get the right amount of funding they need to completely scale and drive these solutions, whether they're an impact or not. And especially when you're going to focus on something like deep tech or something that requires a lot of upfront investment, the traditional, non-dilutive or even angel investment isn't enough to actually get startups from where they are to where they need to be. So the form of venture capital really provides that ability to rapidly scale innovation, but also at the same time then has the secondary effect of creating a lot of jobs across really critical sectors in Europe. So it's important globally, but definitely for Europe to really stay competitive and drive innovation, we need to be able to deploy capital rapidly to these industries, and venture capital is the right way to do that. So I think the ecosystem has definitely grown differently in Europe, perhaps versus the US. So the US has also got a male dominated sector, but it's slightly different in that you have former operators or former entrepreneurs who then decided to go into the world of venture capital. Whereas in Europe, the industry is a bit more nascent, it's earlier stage. And so typically you have people moving in from either a consulting role or a finance role into venture capital. And so traditionally, all of those networks and all of those sectors have been really male dominated and homogeneous. And so when funds were hiring in the past, and possibly even now, they were usually built around their network, right? So rather than, putting a job online, it's probably hiring through people they know, which led to then this underrepresentation in the world of venture capital. And so that's, I think, traditionally why this industry has grown in such a way. But what that is definitely leading to is one, just lack of representation, lack of diversity of opinion, differences in the way you may value or analyze different market potentials and risks, and just completely reduces that diversity of thought or opportunity in the whole ecosystem. I don't think there's a difference between what you would look for from a male or a female role. I have a completely atypical background, right? So engineering, entrepreneurship, and then VC. So I think there is really no one size fits all. And I think you need the different backgrounds in order to enable you to be a good investor. So each fund has different thesis, different stage, and so the different level of market understanding or financial understanding changes depending on what side like stage you're going to go into, but also what industry you're investing into. So I think definitely if you're going in earlier stage and you're investing into more deep tech scientific solutions, then having a background in engineering or STEM is definitely really helpful. So anything around anything in the scientific or engineering background. I do think having an entrepreneurial background definitely helps, because for me specifically, I connect to entrepreneurs in a very different way to perhaps someone who hasn't had the operator experience. And that helps again with early stage investing, but it's not necessarily more important the later down the line. I think ultimately you need to be someone who is able to who wants to learn and is curious to learn, because there is no way you can know about every industry that you're invested into. So you've got to have that curiosity or thirst for knowledge, be comfortable with making decisions where you don't have all of the information at hand, but also it's a really great opportunity to be at the forefront of cutting edge technology and to get to see it way before anyone else does. So I think it's a massive privilege to get to do this. And I think no one background necessarily fits that, because everyone has a different opinion on what they think the future is going to look like. I think you need to have an appetite for risk. And I think that's probably why entrepreneurs could lend themselves to being good investors. It's not necessarily always the case, but I think you need to be comfortable with taking a certain risk based on the fact that you will never be certain. You have to back some really, really bold visions where, sometimes even, everyone says to you, this is absolutely not possible. And you have to also be comfortable that you may in fact be wrong when you're going to make that decision. But you have to have a long-term belief. You have to trust in all of the knowledge that is present in front of you. And in some senses, also trust your gut. I think I said it a bit earlier, but you have the opportunity to really be at the cutting edge of technology. You know exactly what kind of innovation will or will not come to fruition in the next couple of years. So we are essentially enabling what the future looks like, and and then funding or providing capital to those kind of companies. So it's an ability for you to be able to work at that forefront of innovation and capital, and then alongside that, then actually get to, once you've invested into a company, follow them along that journey, which is an incredible opportunity to be able to do so. You get to really help to potentially shape the business. You get access to some amazing entrepreneurs that you get to work with. And then if you end up on a board, then you create a really interesting network for yourself. And your skill set develops so significantly. I would say my learning curve it has just completely, you'll never get bored in this job. There's absolutely no way you can ever get bored in this job, because you're always learning something. I mean, I think I would always be happy to invest into women-led businesses. We know statistically that they are more successful. And if there is the opportunity, or if that arises, then I would absolutely, have it as my personal mission to be able to fund women-led businesses, but not only women-led businesses, in impactful businesses. I spend a lot of time with my entrepreneurs, so it's probably better to ask them than ask me. I like to think of myself as kind of that strategic support. Sometimes you just need someone who is not in the weeds to bounce around ideas with, to spar on. So, obviously we take certain roles as investors, but I would hope, and I think I am, the person that the founders call when they need some advice. So that could be, strategic guidance. It could be support on, trying to hire. So we'll take part in potentially later stage interviews for C-level members. It could be discussing things around impact. It could be even how, discussing if the founders want, of course, topics beyond that, how to deal with their resilience, how do they deal with the day-to-day runnings of how to be an entrepreneur. So it can kind of vary, but it usually ends up being more strategic support. The role is definitely a lot about curiosity and thirst for knowledge. So you have to be very willing to learn about industries that you just don't know about. And then on top of that, have your own thesis and your own hypothesis of what you think a good investment in this space looks like. You're constantly learning. So I really recommend that if someone wants to be a VC, that they are open to and willing to do that, to constantly learn, and then to build a strong network around it, because at the end of the day, this is actually quite a network driven space. So joining different communities, different women-led groups, if you want to continue to, meet with other women in VC. And there's loads of different WhatsApp groups, Slack groups, events, etc., that support that. I do think having some form of mentorship can be very beneficial. It depends on what stage you're at, right, and where you want to get to. But I think if you don't get that internally in the organization that you're in, then I do think it's helpful to seek a mentor maybe outside of the organization. And I think having differences of opinion is definitely a good thing in venture capital. So I would like recommend to women not to be scared to voice their opinion, because just because it's different doesn't mean it's a bad thing. In fact, maybe you're just providing a completely different lens or dynamic to this thinking, and that's what exactly they need.